Northeast India, circa 3rd century BCE. The chamber underneath the stupa has lain undisturbed for 2 centuries, until suddenly, the door seal breaks. Inside steps King Ashoka, leader of the Maurya Empire, a crown he'd won through murder and an empire built by violence. But the slaughter of those battles had caused a change in him. Previously a ruthless killer, he's now renounced violence and war in service of another mission, devoting himself to the practice and spread of Buddhism. And he's come here to get his hands on a powerful relic. That is, of course, if he can get by the guards. A flash in the dark, a grind of gears. 2 automatons careen out of the darkness, animated by possessing spirits, their arms spinning blades. Ashoka parries their blows, looking for the arcane workings that will put them under his power. The story claims that when King Ashoka eventually emerged from that burial stupa, the 2 golems were following him as his servants, though they were not the greatest prize. For now he carried in his hands the ashes of the Buddha. Don't forget, as soon as you're done watching this episode, the next episode in this series is already up a week early and ad-free over on Nebula. Besides the Buddha himself, Ashoka the Great may be the most important figure in early Buddhism, because by adopting Buddhism as his court religion, Ashoka fulfilled a similar role as Constantine played in Christianity, helping the young religion spread and gain legitimacy. Though before we get more into Ashoka, we should really talk about our goals with this series, because you might have noticed by this point that we've been fairly bare bones about describing Buddhist beliefs. Here, our aim is to chart the foundation, spread, evolution, and historical impact of Buddhism, not to explain every element of Buddhist practice and cosmology. Because I'm just gonna be honest, y'all, Buddhism is often just really hard to explain. Heck, even religious scholars and lifelong Buddhists can struggle to understand certain concepts or texts. Case in point, Rob has a degree in religion and some background in Buddhism, yet his brain practically melted while researching this. For example, does Buddhism have a god? Well, no. There is no creator deity. The world just exists in an endless cycle, driven by a chain of causal relationships. Okay, then who are Buddhists praying to when they venerate statues of the Buddha? Well, technically, the answer is no one. Buddha's achieved nirvana, so he gone. But he gave you the tools to achieve enlightenment, and you have to do the rest yourself. Meaning the veneration of Buddha images is partially just gratitude, partially to use it as a focal point for your own self-development, and partially in hopes that offerings and chants will build merit that lead to better rebirths. But wait, hold on again. Don't people call on celestial beings and bodhisattvas for things like healing? Also, isn't there Yama, the god of death? Well, yes, I mean, depending on what branch of Buddhism we're talking about and how it fused with local traditions, and yeah, you can kind of see how this can just become a nesting doll of explanations and caveats if we're not careful. So as a result, we're trying to focus on the basic tenets. Partially for our sake, of course, but also because when Buddhism spread, it was often these simpler teachings that people adopted. Sure, monks dove into the more esoteric subjects, of course, but the average person largely approached it as a practical moral system to guide their lives. Which does circle us nicely back to King Ashoka, one of the greatest monarchs of world history who had been largely forgotten until the 19th century. In 1836, an East India Company officer named James Prinsep deciphered an ancient script used on dozens of rock and pillar monuments across India, some of which contained other languages such as Aramaic and Greek. Meaning that over the next 2 years, he was able to translate and read the incredible story those monuments contained. And the story they told, once they pieced together several honorific names, realizing the monuments were all commissioned by the same man, was that of a converted king. 8 years into Ashoka's reign, he finally conquered the Kalinga region, making him the first to control nearly all of the Indian peninsula, as well as parts of what is now Afghanistan and Bangladesh. His empire included Greek and Aramaic-speaking minorities, and according to his inscriptions and certain mentions in Greek texts, he appears to have exchanged ambassadors with the Hellenistic world, sending representatives to Alexandria, Macedon, and other Greek kingdoms. His stone inscriptions, the first found in India, actually appear to be imports from the Achaemenid Empire of Persia. And it's been suggested he actually imported Persian stonemasons to do the carvings, which explains why his personal symbol of the lion looks so Persian in style. By the way, those carvings became so famous that the lions from his pillars became part of the seal of modern India, and his symbol of the wheel is on their flag. Yeah, he's kind of a big deal. Yet, according to the oldest rock inscriptions, it was at the scene of his final conquest that his reign took a drastic turn. Turns out, the conquest of Kalinga had sickened him, and the 10,000 men he'd killed in battle, not to mention more civilians, began to finally weigh heavy on his conscience. So within the next 2 years, Ashoka gradually converted to Buddhism and decided to govern his empire on Buddhist principles, which caused him to fully renounce violence. Buddhist legend tells that before this conversion, Ashoka was a real, over-the-top, cartoon-style villain. He just loved killing everyone in various itchy and scratchy kind of ways, including, supposedly, 99 of his half-brothers to take the actual throne. Of course, much like Buddha's robot tomb guardians from the beginning of this episode, these legends come from hundreds of years after his death and are almost certainly fictional. However, we don't want to totally trust his inscriptions either, since they probably contain at least an element of propaganda. So just keep all that in mind, you know? Spin from both directions and all that. According to his inscriptions, Ashoka founded monasteries and built stupas all over his territory, including some at major sites of the Buddha's life. In fact, we mostly know about the locations of Siddhartha's life from these monuments built 200 years after his death. These include pillars at the site of Buddha's birthplace, his first sermon, and the location of the Bodhi tree, where Ashoka also built a stone throne on the site of Siddhartha's enlightenment. He also went on the hunt for relics, excavating Buddha's original burial stupa, and supposedly finding 7 of the 8 portions of Buddha's ashes before apportioning them to monasteries across India. But he spread more than relics. Many of his religious inscriptions contain basic summaries of Buddhist ethics. Ashoka would send officials to gather the local populations around these monuments and read them aloud to spread Buddhist principles. However, Ashoka's campaign of religious diffusion was also practical. His inscriptions stated an official policy of religious toleration, and he gave money to non-Buddhist sects. Not to mention, the Buddhist inscriptions were generally focused on the here and now, how governing the empire along Buddhist principles and the people adopting Buddhist morals themselves would improve his subjects' lives. They emphasized compassion for all creatures and respect for family. He also instituted what we'd call today infrastructure policies. Ashoka sent cuttings of medical plants across his empire, so each community would have access to a botanical garden of healing spices and plants. He ordered banyan trees, mango groves, and wells placed along the roadside to provide food, water, and shelter for travelers. And crucially, he abolished the death penalty. But his most radical act actually involved animals. Ashoka ceased hunting, ordered that animal sacrifices stop, that his royal kitchens phase out meat, and established medical facilities specifically to treat animals. Actually, he disavowed the killing of certain animals entirely, which are considered some of the first environmental protection laws. I know, right? Here's where things get contentious, though. See, those laws that centered around the disallowing of animal sacrifices could be seen as directly targeting Brahmanism, the proto-Hinduism the majority of his subjects practiced. This, along with Buddhism's anti-caste system mentality, were pretty radical moves back in the day. Though, honestly, they are actually still controversial in the majority Hindu modern India, which tend to downplay these more radically Buddhist qualities in order to shape Ashoka into a more unifying nationalist figure. And though you don't want to trust legends entirely, Buddhist tales about him suggest these restrictions on traditional Brahmin practices, like sacrifice, were not taken well even then. After 40 years of rule, including a 30-year stretch considered the most peaceful in the region's history, it's said that Ashoka's sons got sick of their father's religious policies and huge donations to monasteries. They deposed him, but he kept on making donations in emulation of the Buddha. His last act, just before dying, was to give away his final possession, a half-piece of fruit. But despite his unification of much of India, his internal spread of Buddhism, and all his social programs, and fighting those robots, it was said that his greatest pride came from the missionaries he sent abroad. Ashoka's envoys had spread Buddhism as far as Sri Lanka, which still looks at him as a founding figure, and they would go much further still, into the rice fields and spice islands of Southeast Asia, triggering artistic innovation, religious melding, war, and games of Capture the Buddha. And we'll get into all that next week. Next week's for suckers, Narrator Matt. I'm watching that Capture the Buddha action right now. Nebula first for the win, baby. That is correct, Casual Matt. The next episode in this series is available right now a full week early thanks to the support from Nebula. Care to give us a sneak peek? Hell yeah, bro! This one gets bonkers pretty quick. Lightning arcs down, crashing into the monastery stupa, and when the abbot goes to inspect the damage, he finds a luminous green statue. The famed Emerald Buddha. It had been taken to Sri Lanka to save it from civil war, then to Angkor Wat, then it was captured by a Thai army who hid it in this stupa, I guess. Possession of it granted an almost mythical legitimacy to any ruler. So naturally, the abbot's king wanted it sent to his capital in Chiang Mai, but the elephant carrying it stubbornly went to another city instead. Actually, with the Nebula First feature over on Nebula, you get access to a whole bunch of great content from our creator friends way earlier than you can see it on YouTube. Sure, but you're kind of like burying the lead, I think. Because thanks to Big Daddy Nebula's support, right, we can release all of our extra history series episodes at least a full week early over there. Too true, Kashmat. But actually, what I love watching on Nebula are a ton of my favorite creators like Tirzu, Mooncat, and Chef PK, all without ads like this one. Oh, I thought you loved ads. Hey, shut up! Not to mention, Nebula is home to a ton of other original shows you can't see anywhere else. Yeah, those are kind of the best too. Actually, I just got finished watching Wendover's latest original on the logistics of commercial fishing. Turns out I had no idea how this multi-billion-dollar industry actually gets fish from whatever water they're found in to my plate. Never gonna take my sushi for granted again, I'll tell you that. Well, dang, Kashmat. With all that great content, Nebula sure must cost a pretty penny. Or at least as much as other streaming services. Nope. Actually, an annual Nebula plan will set you back $50 total for a year. But if you do sign up with our link below, they knock $20 off that price, meaning you pay $2.50 a month for this phenomenal streaming service that bonus doesn't, randomly remove shows from its library whenever they don't want to pay writers residuals. Dang, Casual Matt's going hard on this one. Oh, I'm sorry, but I am just so mad about that. Okay, well, of course I could keep talking to me, myself, and Angry I all day about how Nebula is awesome and its shows are great and that you directly support all of its creators when you sign up, but I just do think that you should check it out for yourself because it really is that great. And don't forget that when you sign up, again, using our link below, your subscription directly supports our channel. So thanks so much for that. Damn, I can't even. All right, deep breaths, buddy. Come on, let's go watch some jet lag. Oh, I hear they go to Japan in that one? They sure do, pal. They sure do. What if I told you that Ahmed Ziad Turk, Angela Valenciana, Arclight Games, Casey Mustra, Dominic Valenciana, Joseph Blame, Kuya Koi, and Skylar Holmes were all legendary patrons? I'm not kidding.